The sky darkened as massive, shimmering ships descended from the heavens, casting eerie shadows over the bustling cities of Earth. Panic erupted in the streets as news of the alien invasion spread like wildfire. People rushed to their homes, barricading doors and whispering prayers into the void. But for Mira, a young engineer with a penchant for solving puzzles, this was a moment of both terror and fascination. She stood on the rooftop of her apartment, her heart racing as she watched the sleek vessels hover ominously above the city. Reports on the news were bleak. The alien hydro weapons had the power to manipulate water in catastrophic ways, generating colossal waves or turning entire landscapes into desolate wastelands. Just days prior, scientists had theorized that these devices were merely myths, but the reality was undeniable now. The hydro weapons were here, and they were terrifying. Suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated the skyline. Mira shielded her eyes just in time to see a massive wall of water erupt from one of the ships, crashing down upon a nearby coastal city. Screams echoed through the air as destruction unfolded live on television. Mira felt a sickening twist in her stomach. Friends, colleagues, lives gone in an instant. The world held its breath, and time seemed to freeze. In the aftermath of the devastation, governments scrambled to respond. A global summit was called, leaders from every corner of the world converging to address the existential threat posed by the hydro weapons. Mira found herself at a makeshift research facility, one of the few places still operating in the chaos. While officials debated on how to combat the alien technology, she and a small group of scientists were determined to understand it. Late into the night, they gathered around flickering screens filled with fragmented data. Each pulse of information painted a picture of the hydro weapons, an intricate web of scientific marvel and terrifying power. Mira, her brow furrowed in concentration, began to notice a pattern in the data. What if these devices weren't just weapons? What if they could be turned to serve humanity? As days passed, desperation settled in. Mira learned that fear breeds hostility. Nations grew increasingly paranoid, rushing to develop countermeasures. Military installations were fortified, and rumors of impending attacks on the ships circulated. Mira's heart sank when she realized that humanity might strike first, turning the hydro weapons into instruments of war. Then, late one evening, an opportunity arose. During a covert meeting, a senior military officer approached Mira with an audacious proposal. "We need to take one of those weapons. Analyze it. Learn its secrets." His voice was hushed, but determination flickered in his eyes. "If we don't, we risk losing everything." Mira hesitated. Stealing an alien weapon could escalate tensions beyond repair. But if they could unlock its potential for good, perhaps they could rewrite the narrative. Her instincts told her this was a chance to steer humanity away from destruction. With a mix of trepidation and resolve, she agreed to help. A plan was set in motion. A small team would infiltrate a captured hydro weapons base during a scheduled power check. But as the day approached, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that they were dancing on the edge of a precipice. The line between savior and villain was razor thin, and the world's fate hung in the balance. The night before the operation, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In the quiet darkness, she whispered a promise to herself. If they succeeded, she would show the world that the hydro weapons could be more than tools of fear. They could be a source of hope. With that thought, she drifted into a restless sleep, unaware that this journey would change everything. The air was thick with tension as Mira and her small team huddled in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of the city, poring over blueprints of the captured hydro weapon. Each schematic glowed faintly on their screens, revealing the intricate technology that had both terrified and captivated humanity. Mira's heart raced. This was more than just a weapon. It was a riddle waiting to be solved. "Okay, team," Mira said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We have 2 hours until the next power check. If we can access the control panel, we might be able to reverse engineer some of its functions. This could be our chance to demonstrate its potential for good." The team, comprising her trusted colleague Lena, a brilliant data analyst, and Raj, a tech-savvy engineer, nodded in agreement. They had spent the last few days in a constant state of urgency, trying to absorb as much information as they could about the hydro weapons. What they uncovered was staggering. The devices could not only create devastating floods, but also purify water and generate renewable energy. As they arrived at the makeshift lab, a cold chill settled in the air. The hydro weapon, a colossal structure made of sleek, metallic alloys, loomed before them, its surface shimmering ominously under the fluorescent lights. Mira felt a mix of awe and fear. This was the heart of the beast. "Let's get to work," she said, and with a flick of her wrist, the screens flickered to life, displaying real-time data feeds. The weapons core hummed softly, almost invitingly, as Mira and her team prepared to interface with it. Minutes turned into an eternity as they navigated the complex system. Just as they were about to extract a key component, an alarm blared, slicing through the silence like a knife. Mira's heart dropped. They had triggered the security protocols. "Move! We need to get out of here," Raj shouted, frantically typing commands to override the lockdown. The door to the lab sealed shut, and heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Panic surged within Mira, but she forced herself to focus. Lena's eyes widened as she pointed to a nearby panel. "There. We can reroute the power supply. It might buy us some time." With seconds ticking away, Mira and Lena dove toward the panel. They quickly rewired the connections, sweat dripping from their brows. Rage kept watch, his ears straining for approaching guards. Just as they completed the override, the door burst open, revealing a squad of armed soldiers. Hands in the air, one of them barked. But before they could react, Mira, adrenaline pumping, tapped a sequence on the hydro weapon's interface. In an instant, a massive surge of water erupted from the weapon, creating a wall of liquid that crashed down in front of the soldiers, momentarily disorienting them. "Go, go, go," Mira shouted, and they sprinted past the stunned guards, making their way through the chaotic hallways of the facility. They reached a safe zone, panting and exhilarated. The weight of their narrow escape hung heavy in the air. As they caught their breath, Mira looked at her team, their faces flushed with a mix of fear and excitement. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We saw what it can do. This isn't just a weapon. It can change lives." Lena nodded, her eyes alight with realization. If we can harness this technology for good, we could help drought-stricken areas, provide clean water to communities in need. This is our opportunity. But Mira's mind raced. With the military tightening its grip on the hydro weapons, would they even be able to share this potential with the world? The shadows of their escape lingered, and a question loomed larger than ever. Could humanity embrace a power they had once feared? The answer felt precarious, hanging in the balance, but Mira was determined to find out. The true battle was just beginning. The next few days felt like a blur for Mira and her team. They operated under the cloak of secrecy, gathering data and refining their plans, while the world outside continued to unravel. The military had tightened its grip on the hydro weapons, launching a campaign to control any information that could undermine their authority. News reports were filled with warnings and doomsday scenarios, painting anyone who dared to challenge the status quo as a potential traitor. In a secluded corner of the city, Mira and her team set up a temporary lab, hidden from prying eyes. Each day, they delved deeper into the hydro weapon's inner workings, unraveling the complexities of its technology. Lena, with her sharp analytical skills, discovered that the weapon's systems had numerous fail-safes that could be bypassed for more peaceful applications. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Mira gathered the team for a pivotal discussion. What if we don't just study the hydro weapons? What if we actually put them to work? Are you suggesting we create a demonstration? Rage asked, eyebrows raised. That's a huge risk. If we fail or, worse, if the military catches wind of it, we could be arrested, or worse. Mira leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with determination. We can show the world what these weapons are truly capable of. If we can harness their power to create something positive, a freshwater lake, for instance, we could change public perception overnight. After a tense debate, the team reluctantly agreed. They meticulously planned their experiment, choosing a dry region desperate for water. The site was remote enough to minimize the risk of interference, but still accessible to gather data and share their findings later. As the day of the experiment arrived, a nervous excitement hung in the air. Mira felt a knot in her stomach, torn between hope and fear. They packed their equipment and set off under the cover of darkness, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. When they arrived, the barren landscape stretched before them, cracked earth begging for rain. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows as they set up the hydro weapon. Mira felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This was a chance to reclaim the narrative surrounding these devices. Once everything was in place, Mira and her team activated the hydro weapon. The machine hummed to life, its core glowing with a brilliant blue light. Mira held her breath, her heart pounding as water began to swirl around the device, rising in a majestic column before dispersing across the parched earth. In moments, the ground soaked up the water, transforming the dusty terrain into a glistening expanse of life. The once desolate area began to flourish before their eyes, grasses sprouting and wildflowers blooming as if awakened from a long slumber. But their triumph was short-lived. Just as the transformation reached its peak, a fleet of military vehicles thundered into the area, sirens blaring. Mira's heart sank as she recognized the insignia on the vehicles. Officials from the government were on their way to shut them down. "Quick, we need to pack up," Reg shouted, panic edging into his voice. The beauty they had created now felt like a target, a symbol of defiance that could cost them everything. Mira's mind raced. They had to record the evidence of their success, to show the world that the hydro weapons could be a force for good. She turned to Lena, who was already capturing data and images. "We need to broadcast this. It could sway public opinion." With adrenaline surging through her veins, Mira quickly tapped into the weapon's communications systems, setting up a live feed. "This is our moment," she whispered, her fingers flying over the keys. Just as the military arrived, Mira hit broadcast. The screen flickered to life, and the image of the lush, vibrant landscape filled homes across the globe. They could either silence them or become a beacon of hope. The battle had shifted, and they were no longer just fugitives. They were revolutionaries. As the broadcast went live, Mira's heart raced. The lush landscape, once barren and desolate, burst onto screens around the world. Flowers danced in the gentle breeze, and shimmering water pooled where once there was only dry earth. The comments flooded in almost instantly, shock, awe, and a glimmer of hope swept through social media platforms like wildfire. But the euphoria was short-lived. Mira could see the military vehicles approaching in the distance, dust clouds billowing behind them. Time was running out. "We have to make this count," she urged her team, her voice strained with urgency. "We need to show them we're not just using these weapons as tools of destruction, but as instruments of life." As Raj secured their equipment, Lena frantically uploaded the data to various platforms, ensuring that no matter what happened, their experiment would be documented. "This is going to change everything," she exclaimed, a mix of excitement and fear dancing in her eyes. Mira watched the live comments pour in. "Is this real? How can we do this everywhere? These weapons are a gift, not a curse." The tide was shifting, but the approaching military presence was a grim reminder of the risk they were taking. Suddenly, a loudspeaker crackled to life, breaking through the excitement. "This is a military operation. You are to cease all activities immediately and surrender." The voice was stern, echoing across the once quiet landscape. Mira felt a wave of defiance wash over her. "We can't back down now," she shouted, standing tall in front of the hydro weapon. "We're proving that these weapons can be used for good. If you destroy this, you destroy hope." As the soldiers advanced, Mira reached for the weapons controls, determined to amplify the water output. If she could show the power of the hydro weapons in their benevolent form, it might sway public opinion enough to save them from military intervention. With a flick of her wrist, the weapon roared to life, and torrents of water surged forth, creating an even larger pool that glistened in the sunlight. The vibrant scene contrasted sharply with the grim figures of soldiers approaching, their weapons drawn. "Stop! You'll drown us!" One soldier yelled, but Mira didn't back down. Instead, she turned to the camera, her face filled with urgency. "Look at what we can achieve. This is not a weapon of war. It can bring life to parched lands. It can save lives." The crowd of soldiers hesitated, glancing at each other, uncertainty creeping into their ranks. Mira's words echoed in their minds, battling against the fear that had been instilled in them. For the first time, they were confronted with a vision of the hydro weapons as a source of hope rather than destruction. Just then, a commotion erupted from the rear of the military convoy. A group of civilians, drawn by the broadcast, surged forward, carrying makeshift banners. "We want clean water. Use the weapons for life," they shouted, their voices mingling with the roar of the hydro weapon. The soldiers were taken aback. The once united front of military might was now fractured by the unexpected show of solidarity. Mira seized the moment. "This is our chance," she urged her team. "We need to keep pushing forward." With renewed determination, Mira faced the approaching soldiers. "Join us. We can work together to harness this technology for everyone's benefit. Don't you want to be part of something that changes the world?" The tension hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. The military's resolve faltered as they witnessed the unyielding hope embodied by the crowd. Mira's heart raced as she saw a few soldiers lower their weapons, visibly torn between orders and the compelling vision of a brighter future. In that moment, the tide truly began to turn. The soldiers' hesitation reflected the changing winds of public sentiment. For the first time, the hydro weapons weren't just symbols of fear. They were the harbingers of hope, and Mira stood at the forefront of this revolution, ready to embrace whatever came next. The battle lines had blurred, and the true fight for humanity's future was just beginning. The air crackled with tension as Mira faced the military soldiers, the vibrant landscape behind her a stark contrast to the weapons they brandished. The crowd of civilians, emboldened by her words, surged forward, chanting for change. But the soldiers were caught in a fierce battle of loyalty. Loyalty to orders versus loyalty to the people they had sworn to protect. "Step back! Stand down!" One of the officers shouted, struggling to maintain control. But his voice wavered as he looked at the faces of the civilians, faces filled with desperation and hope. Mira seized the moment. "You're not just soldiers. You're human beings. This is your chance to decide who you really want to be. Join us in this fight for life." She gestured to the hydro weapon, its waters still flowing freely. "This technology can change the world for the better. Will you stand with us or against us?" Whispers spread through the ranks of soldiers. Some looked at each other uncertain. Others exchanged glances filled with empathy, their resolve wavering. The atmosphere shifted, and Mira could feel the tide turning. In the background, Lena continued to document the scene, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. The live feed was still broadcasting to millions, and comments were flooding in. "This is what we need. Stand with them. We have to fight for our future." The call for unity was resonating far beyond the battlefield. Suddenly, a loud crash broke through the tension as a group of high-ranking military officials arrived, faces set with grim determination. The lead official, a stern woman with a reputation for ruthlessness, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing at the scene before her. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, taking in the crowd and the hydro weapon with palpable disdain. Mira squared her shoulders, stepping forward. "We're showing what these weapons can do when used for good. This is a demonstration of hope and healing, not destruction. We can turn the tide of public opinion, and we need your help." The officer's expression hardened. "You think this is a game? These weapons were designed for combat. You're risking everything for a fantasy." "No," Mira insisted, her voice unwavering. "We're risking everything for a future where we control the narrative. We can save lives instead of taking them. Join us, and we can make this a reality." As tension mounted, the crowd erupted in chants, demanding that the military side with the people rather than the oppressive powers that sought to maintain control. The soldiers were torn, caught between their duty and the growing chorus of voices calling for change. In a bold move, one soldier stepped forward, lowering his weapon. "I joined the military to protect people, not to harm them. If there's a chance to use these weapons for good, I want to be a part of that." The soldier's declaration sparked a ripple effect. One by one, others began to lower their weapons, nodding in agreement. The high-ranking official's face darkened with anger and frustration. "This is insubordination. You'll face the consequences." But the moment had passed. The crowd surged forward, emboldened by the soldier's defection. The soldier's camaraderie was no longer bound by military order, but by a shared vision of a better future. "Now is the time." Mira shouted, her voice ringing with fervour. "Let's work together to harness this technology for everyone's benefit. We can save lives and restore hope." As the military ranks began to shift, the high-ranking official realized she was losing control. Her expression twisted into one of fierce determination. "You may think you've won today, but this isn't over. There are forces at play that you can't even begin to comprehend." But the weight of her words fell flat. The tide of change was undeniable. Mira's heart swelled with hope as she saw the crowd, now united, ready to fight for a future where hydro weapons were symbols of life, not destruction. The confrontation had sparked a revolution, and the battle lines were being redrawn. Mira turned to her team, their eyes alight with excitement. "This is just the beginning. We have to keep pushing forward. We need to reach out to the world to make sure everyone understands what's at stake. As they regrouped, the realization set in. They weren't just fighting against a military presence. They were battling an entrenched ideology. And with every ounce of courage, they would ensure that humanity would embrace the potential of the Hydra weapons, transforming fear into empowerment. The atmosphere crackled with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation as Mira and her team watched the soldiers, once their adversaries, now standing alongside them in a fragile alliance. The world had turned a corner, but the struggle was far from over. They had ignited a movement, but as the high-ranking official glared at them, it was clear that the opposition would not back down easily. "Gather the data," Mira instructed, urgency creeping into her voice. "We need to compile everything we have, every video, every testimonial. We need to ensure this goes global." She glanced around at the civilian crowd, now swelling with support. "We'll show the world what's happening here. This is more than just a demonstration. It's a declaration of our intent to use these Hydra weapons for good." Lena was already on it, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she uploaded footage to multiple platforms. The live feed is still active. We're reaching millions. If we can keep this momentum, we can sway public opinion completely. As news outlets began to pick up the story, the energy among the crowd surged. People held signs demanding change, and chants of "We want life" filled the air. The narrative was shifting. No longer were they simply resisting oppression. They were advocating for a new future. But just as hope bloomed, the high-ranking military official stepped forward, flanked by reinforcements. "You may have won this moment," she spat, her voice icy. "But there are forces at work that will not tolerate insurrection. You think this ends here? You're mistaken." Mira met her gaze, unwavering. "You underestimate the power of the people. This isn't just about technology. It's about humanity reclaiming its right to thrive." The official's lips twisted in disdain, but Mira could sense uncertainty in her posture. This wasn't a mere confrontation of arms. It was a clash of ideals. Suddenly, a group of scientists from the local university arrived, drawn by the broadcast. They came armed with additional research and data that illustrated the Hydra weapon's potential for healing the planet. "We've been studying these devices for months," one of them exclaimed, holding up a tablet filled with graphs and models. "If we can tap into their power, we could combat drought, improve agriculture, and even reverse some effects of climate change." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Mira felt a wave of energy wash over her. This was no longer just a local movement. It was gaining national and global momentum. The high-ranking official, sensing the tide turning against her, barked out orders to her troops. "Secure the area. We will not let this uprising spread." But the soldiers, now visibly conflicted, exchanged glances. Many of them had families and friends in the audience. They weren't just soldiers, they were citizens, and they began to question their own orders. A young soldier stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "I can't do this. We're here to protect our people, not silence them." Mira seized the opportunity. "We're on the brink of something incredible. Join us. Help us reshape this technology for a better future." As the tension reached a boiling point, Mira's heart raced. The military's control was crumbling, and she could feel the weight of change in the air. The crowd surged forward, emboldened by the growing sense of unity. This wasn't just a demonstration anymore. It was a full-blown uprising. In a flash, the official signaled for her troops to advance, but several soldiers hesitated, unsure. Mira stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "We can't afford to fight each other. Look at what we can accomplish together." This is a chance to redefine our destiny." The crowd erupted in support, chanting her name. The pressure mounted as the soldiers began to lower their weapons, and the high-ranking official's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. "Enough," she shouted, her voice cracking. But it was too late. The soldiers were already stepping back, the lines of division dissolving. As the military's resolve faltered, Mira felt a surge of hope. They were standing on the precipice of a new era, one where the hydro weapons could be embraced as tools for healing rather than destruction. But in the back of her mind, she knew the fight wasn't over. There would be powerful interests that wouldn't accept this shift without a fight. Still, Mira could see a glimmer of a future where humanity chose to rise, to embrace its potential. And with every beat of her heart, she knew they had to keep pushing forward, for the stakes had never been higher. The battle for a brighter tomorrow had begun, and they were determined to win. The atmosphere was electric as the soldiers lowered their weapons, caught in the whirlwind of a moment that could reshape history. Mira stood at the forefront, a mix of exhilaration and apprehension coursing through her veins. She could feel the weight of the world's gaze upon them, the live feed broadcasting their standoff to millions. The high-ranking official, now visibly rattled, tried to regain control. "You are making a grave mistake. This is treason." Her voice echoed through the crowd, but her words lacked the conviction they once had. Mira took a deep breath, her heart pounding. No, this is the awakening of a new consciousness. We are no longer bound by the old ways of fear and oppression. We have a chance to create something meaningful together. The civilians rallied behind her, chanting louder. "We want life. We want change." The energy was contagious, an unstoppable force pushing against the remnants of the old regime. Suddenly, a familiar face emerged from the throng. Elena, Mira's mentor and one of the leading scientists in the study of hydro weapons. She stepped forward, eyes fierce. "Mira, this is incredible. You've turned the tide, but we need to make sure this change is sustainable. We have to prepare for their counterattack." Mira nodded, understanding the implications of their situation. "We need to solidify our findings and present them as a viable solution to the public. If we can show the world how these weapons can benefit humanity, we'll gain more support." Lena, still documenting every moment, added, "We should set up a centralized communication hub. We can coordinate efforts with scientists, activists, and citizens across the globe. This isn't just a local movement, it's a global one." As they spoke, the military troops exchanged anxious glances, their previous certainty crumbling. The high-ranking official's frustration peaked, and she barked out orders to her remaining forces. "Get them under control. We will not let this insurrection spread." But even her own troops hesitated, many still processing the shifting dynamics. Mira felt a surge of hope. Perhaps they could sway more soldiers to their side. "Listen to your hearts," she called out, her voice rising above the chaos. "You know what's right. You have the power to choose. Join us in this fight for life and progress." At that moment, a soldier stepped forward, voice trembling but resolute. "I refuse to hurt my own people. I believe in what they're fighting for." A ripple of agreement spread through the ranks as more soldiers began to lower their weapons, one by one. The military's facade of control was cracking, and the crowd roared in approval. But just then, a heavy rumble echoed through the air. Mira's heart sank as she recognized the sound of additional military vehicles approaching. Reinforcements had arrived, likely armed with more advanced weaponry. The situation was escalating, and the stakes were higher than ever. "We need to prepare," Elena urged, her eyes scanning the incoming convoy. If they come at us with force, we'll need a plan. Myra's mind raced. They could no longer rely solely on hope. They needed a strategy. "Everyone listen," she shouted, drawing the crowd's attention. "We need to create a barrier. Use what we have, natural resources, anything. We must show them that we're not backing down." With renewed energy, the civilians and defected soldiers began to gather debris, constructing makeshift barricades. Mira could see the determination on their faces, each person realizing the weight of their role in this pivotal moment. As the military reinforcements arrived, the tension thickened. Soldiers poured out of the vehicles, weapons at the ready, their eyes scanning the scene. The high-ranking official stood at the front, a fierce glare directed at Mira and her supporters. "Enough of this charade. You will be met with force if you don't disperse immediately," she shouted, her voice laced with desperation. But Mira stood tall, a beacon of defiance. "We will not back down. We will fight for a future where these hydro weapons are used to heal, not harm." With that declaration hanging in the air, the ground beneath them trembled, not just from the military presence, but from the shift of a tide that was unstoppable. The choice had been made. This was no longer just a battle of weapons, it was a battle of ideals, and Mira was ready to embrace the storm. The tension was palpable as Mira stood at the forefront of her makeshift barricade, facing the advancing military reinforcements. The air was thick with uncertainty, but beneath it lay an undercurrent of hope. People around her, soldiers, civilians, and scientists, had chosen to unite, and that unity was a force greater than any weapon. "Get ready." Mira called out to her team, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We need to show them that we're not just fighting for ourselves, but for everyone who believes in a better future." As the military advanced, the high-ranking official shouted commands, her voice laced with frustration and disbelief. "You are making a grave mistake. Stand down now, and you may yet save yourselves." But Mira's heart was set. "We're standing up for what's right," she declared, her voice rising above the chaos. "We're not afraid of the future we can create." The soldiers hesitated, the tension within their ranks palpable. Some exchanged uneasy glances, grappling with the weight of their choices. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were citizens, part of a movement that demanded change. With a sudden burst of inspiration, Mira reached for the hydro weapon controls again. "Let's show them the true power of this technology." With a few swift commands, she activated the weapon, and a massive spray of water erupted, creating a dazzling arc that shimmered in the sunlight. The unexpected display caught everyone off guard. Water cascaded down, creating a barrier of mist that shimmered like a protective veil. The soldiers hesitated, momentarily distracted by the beauty of the scene unfolding before them. "Look!" One of the defected soldiers shouted, pointing at the water. "It's not just a weapon, it can be a symbol of hope." The realization spread through the crowd like wildfire. The hydro weapon, once a tool of destruction, could now represent life, healing, and unity. Mira could feel the shift in the air as soldiers began to lower their weapons, entranced by the vision of a better world. "Join us," she shouted, her voice steady. "Let's make this about cooperation, not conflict. We can rebuild together." As the barrier of mist swirled around them, the crowd erupted in cheers. The soldiers, inspired by the rallying cry, began to move toward the barricade, their faces alight with determination. More and more soldiers dropped their weapons, joining the civilians in their stand. Then, in a surprising turn, the high-ranking official, realizing her grip on power was slipping, stepped back. "This isn't how it's supposed to be," she shouted, But her words fell on deaf ears as her authority crumbled under the weight of the people's resolve. Mira could see the tide had irrevocably turned. "This is our moment. Let's show the world what we can achieve," she cried out, and the crowd responded with an uproar of support, a chorus of voices echoing across the landscape. As news of their stand spread, the world watched in awe. Live broadcasts showcased the transformation of the hydro weapons from symbols of oppression to instruments of healing. The people's movement gained traction, sparking global conversations about the responsible use of technology for the benefit of humanity. Mira, standing amidst her allies, felt the weight of history shift. The hydro weapon now functioned as a fountain, pouring fresh water into the soil and transforming the land. What had once been a barren wasteland was blooming into a vibrant oasis, a testament to their victory. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Mira took a moment to reflect. The battle was won, but the journey was far from over. They would need to build on this momentum, harness the power of the hydro weapons responsibly, and ensure that their message resonated worldwide. With her team at her side, Mira looked toward the horizon, a sense of purpose igniting within her. This is just the beginning. Together, we'll show the world that humanity can rise above fear and embrace its potential for good. As they stood united, the dawn of a new era began to break, filled with promise and hope. A future where humanity could wield its greatest technologies not as weapons of war, but as beacons of life. The revolution had begun, and together they would shape a world worth fighting for.